purpose of this presentation today is that maybe you've heard about the end of the NHR. Yes, you're all aware of that. Okay. The thing is that the state budget law has been voted and it has been decided to put an end to this advantageous tax status. So I wanted first to explain a little bit what's the NHR. So it stands for non-habitual resident, and basically it's tax benefits for newcomers. The idea of Portugal was to attract newcomers to Portugal, no matter what their nationality is. So even Portuguese people to come back to Portugal. The main condition is to become a tax resident and to not have been a tax resident for the 5 previous years. So without NHR, income from work are taxed according to a progressive tax rate, which goes from 14.5% up to 48%. And there are even some other surtaxes when you reach a certain level of income. So basically, when you're making more than 80,000, you have another range of taxes between 2.5 and 5% additional to this progressive rate that we know about. And for capital gain and real estate income, so for instance dividends, they are taxed at a flat rate of 28%. The advantage with the NHR is that for some activities, the income from work are taxed not between 14.5 and 48, but they are taxed at a flat rate. And that flat rate is 20%. So you can understand that there is a big advantage to be NHR when your income from work when your income from work validates. How does it validate? It needs to be a work that is considered as a high added value activity. So there is a list of these high added value activities that is set by a decree of Portugal. So basically, being a lawyer is not a high added value activity. Sorry for making you waste your time. No, but my point is that it's a list that states whether your activity is a high added value activity or not. So basically doctors, but also artists, IT developers, these are high added value activities. So what is important to do is to check that decree, check that list, to make sure that your activity is considered as a high added value activity. In that case, you benefit from the 20% rate instead of going on that progressive tax rate from 14.5 to 48. So that's one of the main benefits. So this is for the taxation of income, I put it as from work. So basically it's if you're freelance or if you're an employee. But then there is this other category of income, which is the capital gain. So as we talked previously about dividends, for instance, if you receive dividends from a company that is registered abroad, those dividends can be exempted in Portugal. I really insist on the can, because this is if this income is taxable in the other country. So basically, when you're in an international situation, like yours potentially, if you receive dividends from a company that is abroad, you have 2 countries that can say, oh, I'm the one who can tax this income. So you have the country of the company who will be like, oh, it's a company registered in my country who is generating this income, so I can tax it. But there is also the country where you're residing that can say, oh no, but the person that is taxable resides in my country, so it's me who's gonna tax this income. So to solve this situation, you have treaties that are signed between 2 countries to decide which of them is gonna tax the income. So according to this non-double taxation agreement, we can define which country will tax. And basically, if it's the other country who is able to tax, that dividend, for instance, is going to be exempted in Portugal. And the exemption is something that is really strong, and it's something that benefits if you're NHR. If you're not NHR, it's going to be a tax credit. Do you know what's the difference between exemption and tax credit? No? Yes? So do you want to go for it? For the tax credit versus...
Pay first and then you get back the credit. Tax credit side, and exemption is pure, you don't have to pay at all.
Yeah, so basically, if a revenue is taxed in another country, but is still taxable in Portugal, if you benefit from a tax credit, what will happen is that you will pay in Portugal minus what you've paid abroad. Whereas if you're exempted, like the NHR are exempted, if they pay abroad, they have just nothing to pay in Portugal at all. So it's much more interesting to be exempted than to have just a tax credit. So yeah, so as I was explaining, with the NHR, you have two main benefits. It's the flat rate of 20% for the high added value activities, and the exemption on the revenues from abroad. It's a simplified version, but of course it's if it's taxable abroad or if it's taxed abroad according to the double agreement treaties.
I have a question on that, or would you like to have the questions in here?
Well, maybe we can go through the presentation. If it doesn't answer your question, I'll answer it at the end. So the high added value activities, just to have a glimpse at it, for instance, the executive managers of companies, as I was saying, the artists, but also the people in the IT sectors. It's important to really check this list to make sure whether your activity is part of it or not. And if it's part of it, then you can benefit from the 20% rate. And for the capital gain, it's from abroad. So as I was explaining, it's an exemption if it's taxable abroad versus tax credit. So with the NHR, you benefit from the exemption. And yeah, it's a status that lasts for 10 years. I wanted to go back on that because most of people know it's for 10 years, but with the end of NHR, people were worrying, is their NHR status ending at the end of the year? The answer is no. If you secured your NHR status, it will last for the 10 years as previously stated. So if you already have secured your NHR, you're okay. And if you have not your NHR status yet, the three conditions are to become a tax resident in 2023, to not have been a tax resident between 2018 and today, and to request the status in time. This last condition seems very basic, but it's really important. A lot of people missed the benefit of the NHR status because they missed the deadline. So yeah, the last people who will be able to benefit from the NHR are those who are gonna turn as tax resident in 2023. But there's always a but, there's a transitional period. So for some people, especially those who are not from an EU country, they have to go through a whole process to obtain a visa and then a residency permit. And it's only after that that they can obtain their NIF number with their address in Portugal, which makes them tax resident in Portugal. So for those who become tax resident in 2024, they will be able to request the NHR status if they can prove that they were already in the process of settling in Portugal in 2023. So the idea of this transitional period is to say, okay guys, you know that we're ending up the NHR, but it's not a reason to rush in. It's only if you were already planning to come to Portugal that you will be able to take advantage of the NHR. Or another way of putting it is to say, you wanted to come to Portugal, you knew you would be able to benefit from the NHR, and you're gonna be able to benefit from it if you were already on your way to Portugal in 2023. But the way to prove that are really restricted. So it's basically you need to show that you signed a rental agreement, or that you had a promissory employment contract or an employment contract that have been signed before a certain date. So for some documents, it's before the 10th of October 2023, and for other documents, it's before the 31st of December 2023. The point is, it's quite complicated. So if you can become a tax resident in 2023, it's safer for you and you secure your status. If you are in this situation where you're a non-EU citizen and you're waiting for your permit, and this is what is making it complicated for you, then make sure you have the proofs to show that actually you were on your way to settle in Portugal since 2023. Yeah. So this is the point, is about this end of NHR and transitional period. You might also have heard about this new NHR. It's not a new NHR, it's a new tax regime that is also an advantageous tax regime. But the scope is narrower and the benefits are also less interesting than the NHR. So, as you saw for the NHR, the conditions were to become a tax resident, not have been a tax resident before. With this new tax regime, it spots only a few positions, so highly qualified jobs, board members, R&D positions in certain entities. It makes it quite narrow. Those entities have to be certified, recognized by certain Portuguese institutions, etc., etc. So it makes it really dependent on the company for which you're working for. So it really makes the scope much more narrow. And regarding the benefits, so those activities will benefit from the 20% tax rate. But regarding the capital gain from abroad, there is no more exemption. It's a tax credit. And as we've seen in the beginning of the presentation, the capital gain income are taxed at a 28%. So even if you benefit from a tax credit on the tax you've been paying abroad, in the end, what you're gonna pay in Portugal is 28 minus what you've paid before. So in the end, you're paying 28%. So yeah, the conclusion is the title of my presentation basically is that you'd better get your NHR before it's too late. And so your question would be, okay, but how do I get my NHR? It's 3 steps. So first you have to become a resident in Portugal, then you have to become a tax resident, and then you have to request your NHR before the 31st of December. And now we arrive at your questions.